Travel isn't sold to you honestly. It's sold through highlight reels, smiling locals, and the promise that a passport stamp equals freedom. But for many Black travelers, the moment wheels touch the ground, the energy shifts. Extra questions, lingering stares, rules that suddenly feel flexible, just not in your favor. That disconnect between the marketing and the lived reality is exactly why this video exists. Welcome to Virtual Travel by Brian. Today's investigation is titled Top 10 Countries Black People Rarely Visit or Avoid Based on Lived Experience. And this isn't guesswork. I investigated why Black people rarely visit these places, and what I found kept repeating across stories, forums, expat conversations, and real-world experiences. The patterns were too consistent to ignore. I revealed the truth about how cultural exclusion, visa barriers, and day-to-day treatment quietly shape where Black people feel comfortable traveling, relocating, or building a life abroad. This isn't about fear-mongering or playing the victim. It's about global travel reality. Why do certain destinations have a consistently low Black population? Why do Black tourists and expats describe the same frustrations, over-scrutiny, isolation, or feeling tolerated rather than welcomed? And why do these experiences rarely make it into mainstream travel content? In this countdown, we're breaking down what Black travelers should know before visiting a country, pulling back the curtain on international travel challenges for Black people, and exposing the fine print that gets skipped. Watch to the end, stay engaged, and when you hear your own experiences reflected back to you, drop them in the comments. Subscribe, stay locked in, and let's get into the countdown. Number 10. Japan. Japan doesn't reject you at the airport. It doesn't shout. It doesn't glare openly. It smiles, bows politely, and hands you a system that quietly reminds you every single day that you are not meant to stay. On the surface, Japan feels like a dream destination. Spotless streets, world-class public transport, low violent crime, unmatched convenience, and a culture built on order and respect. For many Black travelers, the first visit feels magical. The 10th month living there? That's where the story changes. Cultural inclusion in Japan drops off fast once you step outside major global hubs like Tokyo, Osaka, or parts of Yokohama. Japan is over 97% ethnically homogeneous, according to government data, and that homogeneity isn't just demographic, it's social. Foreigners are categorized as gaijin, and while the word is often defended as neutral, lived experience tells a different story. Black expats consistently report being stared at, photographed without consent, or treated as a curiosity rather than a neighbor. Not hostile, just distant, cold, permanent other energy. The visa situation doesn't help. Japan's long-term visas are rigid, employer-dependent, and bureaucratically heavy. Job mobility is limited, self-employment pathways are narrow, and permanent residency typically requires many years of uninterrupted work under strict conditions. Citizenship? Technically possible. Realistically rare. Japan's naturalization rate is one of the lowest among developed nations, and assimilation expectations often include cultural conformity that goes far beyond language fluency. Expat feedback tells a consistent story. Black professionals describe hitting an invisible ceiling, passed over for promotions, excluded from informal networks, and quietly reminded that no matter how well they speak Japanese or follow the rules, full acceptance remains out of reach. Dating is another pressure point, often shaped by fetishization on one end and outright rejection on the other. Again, not loud racism, just social walls that never quite come down. Economically, opportunities exist but are narrow. Teaching English dominates the foreign job market, and high-skilled roles are harder to access without elite credentials or corporate sponsorship. Outside big cities, landlords frequently refuse foreign tenants outright, a practice that remains legal and culturally normalized. So yes, Japan is safe, efficient, and incredibly well run. But safety isn't the same as belonging. For Black expats, Japan often delivers comfort without community, structure without warmth. It's a place many admire, some enjoy short-term, and very few truly call home. And that quiet isolation is exactly why it shows up on this list. Number 9. South Korea. South Korea knows how to make a great first impression. Neon-lit streets, late-night food runs, fast internet, spotless subways, and pop culture that's conquered the planet. For many Black travelers, the early weeks feel exciting, almost electric. But once the honeymoon fades and daily life kicks in, a different rhythm emerges, one that feels less like discovery and more like friction. Colorism sits at the center of that tension. South Korea remains one of the most appearance-driven societies in the developed world, with skin tones still tied, fairly or not, to assumptions about status, intelligence, and professionalism. Surveys and academic studies on Korean social attitudes consistently show strong preferences for lighter skin, and Black expats frequently report being stared at, avoided on public transport, or treated as a spectacle rather than a peer. It's rarely aggressive. It's subtler than that, and subtle discrimination has a way of wearing you down slowly. Economic opportunity narrows the longer you stay. Teaching English dominates the foreign labor market, especially for Black expats. Outside of that lane, doors close quickly unless you're sponsored by a major multinational or possess niche, high-demand skills. Even then, advancement can stall. Many Black professionals describe being hired for visibility but excluded from leadership tracks or decision-making roles. The ceiling isn't announced, you just keep bumping into it. Housing is where reality hits hardest. Online expat forums are full of near-identical stories. Approved income, solid contracts, clean records, followed by sudden refusals once a landlord realizes the applicant is Black. This isn't illegal in South Korea, and real estate agents often explain it casually, as if they're discussing parking rules. Job discrimination follows a similar pattern: interviews that go well until face-to-face meetings shift the tone, or contracts that mysteriously disappear. Social integration proves equally difficult. Korean society is tightly networked, built around school ties, workplace loyalty, and family lineage. Breaking into those circles as a foreigner is tough. As a Black foreigner, it's tougher. Dating can swing between fetishization and exclusion, neither of which builds real connection. Many expats describe having fun acquaintances, but very few deep friendships, even after years in the country. Short-term, South Korea can feel exhilarating. The food slaps, the nightlife delivers, the culture moves fast. Long-term, the emotional math changes. Constant visibility, limited upward mobility, and everyday micro-barriers start to outweigh the perks. South Korea isn't chaotic or unsafe. It's efficient, polished, and controlled. But for many Black expats, it's also exhausting. A place that entertains you brilliantly, while quietly reminding you that you are never meant to fully belong. Number 8. Poland. Poland doesn't hide its pride, and it doesn't dilute it either. The country has spent the last decade branding itself as traditional, nationalistic, and unapologetically Polish. For tourists passing through historic squares and postcard-perfect old towns, that confidence can feel charming. For Black expats trying to live there, it can feel like walking into a room where everyone knows you don't belong. But no one feels the need to say it out loud. Racial hostility in Poland isn't hypothetical or anecdotal. Human rights organizations and EU monitoring bodies have repeatedly documented racist incidents, nationalist marches, and xenophobic rhetoric targeting non-European minorities. Black residents and students frequently report verbal harassment on public transport, being followed in stores, or hearing slurs shouted openly, especially outside major cities like Warsaw or Krakow. Poland's leadership has leaned heavily into protecting national identity, and while that language is often framed around immigration policy, the social message travels fast. Cultural inclusion remains extremely thin because Poland has one of the smallest Black populations in Europe. That means visibility is high and comfort is low. Being Black in Poland isn't something you can blend into. You stand out everywhere. Stares are constant. Photos happen without permission. Curiosity often replaces courtesy. Some locals are friendly and genuinely welcoming, but the absence of established Black communities makes everyday life feel isolating. There's no cultural cushion, no shared infrastructure, no sense that you're anything other than an exception. Visa access adds another layer of friction. Poland's immigration system is notoriously bureaucratic, paper-heavy, and slow. Residency permits can take months or longer, while applicants sit in legal limbo, unable to travel or change jobs. For non-EU citizens, especially those without corporate sponsorship, the process feels like endurance testing, disguised as administration. Rules are applied inconsistently, and language barriers only magnify the stress. Economically, Poland is growing. Manufacturing, tech, outsourcing, and logistics have expanded rapidly, and wages have risen compared to a decade ago. But growth doesn't equal inclusion. Black professionals often find themselves boxed into limited roles, passed over for advancement, or excluded from informal workplace networks that drive opportunity. Networking culture skews local, and accents or skin tone can quietly stall progress. Poland functions. It's organized, affordable by European standards, and economically ambitious. But ambition doesn't automatically translate to openness. For Black expats, Poland often feels like a place that tolerates your presence while reminding you that the blueprint was never drawn with you in mind. And that constant reminder, subtle or loud, is what keeps many from staying long-term. Number 7. Hungary. Hungary doesn't whisper its stance, it broadcasts it. Over the past decade, the government has made anti-immigration rhetoric a central political identity, framing outsiders as threats to culture, safety, and national survival. That messaging doesn't stay in parliament, it seeps into daily life, shaping how Black expats are seen, questioned, and treated the moment they step outside the tourist bubble. For Black travelers, the first reaction in Hungary is often curiosity. Long stares, lingering looks, children pointing, phones coming out. In a country with a very small Black population, visibility is unavoidable, but curiosity has a short shelf life. Over time, it starts to blur into suspicion. Expat reports consistently describe being stopped more frequently by police, asked for documents without clear cause, or followed in shops just in case. Racial profiling isn't hidden, it's normalized and rarely challenged. The social climate reflects the politics. Hungary's leadership has repeatedly warned against multiculturalism, and public campaigns have openly targeted migrants. While those messages are often framed around borders and refugees, Black expats quickly learn they're swept into the same category. You're not seen as an individual professional or resident, you're seen as part of a broader, foreign problem. That framing shapes interactions at banks, government offices, and even apartment viewings. Housing is a recurring pain point. Online expat forums are filled with stories of sudden refusals once landlords realize a prospective tenant is Black. No explanation, no apology, just the apartment is no longer available. Employment follows a similar pattern. Even qualified Black professionals report being overlooked for roles or passed over for advancement once face-to-face interactions begin. Hungary's labor market is already tight for foreigners. Being Black adds another invisible filter. Economically, Hungary looks attractive on paper. Budapest is affordable compared to Western Europe, utilities are relatively low, and day-to-day costs feel manageable. That affordability pulls people in. But what you save financially, you often pay for emotionally. Constant vigilance, constant self-editing, constant awareness that you stand out in ways you can't control. Social integration remains limited. Friendships tend to stay surface level, and deeper connections are rare without strong language skills and local ties. Dating can be awkward, swinging between fetishization and rejection. Many Black expats describe feeling tolerated rather than welcomed, allowed to exist, but never fully accepted. Hungary isn't chaotic or unsafe. It's orderly, historic, and undeniably beautiful. But beneath the charm sits a social environment shaped by exclusionary politics and normalized suspicion. For Black expats, the country often delivers affordability at the cost of peace of mind. Cheap rent doesn't offset the weight of constantly feeling watched, and that emotional tax is why so many eventually decide it's not worth the savings. Number 6. China. China, outside the glossy Tier 1 cities, operates on a completely different set of rules, and Black expats feel that difference immediately. In Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen, international exposure softens the edges. Step beyond those zones, and the welcome becomes conditional, cautious, and often uncomfortable. The infrastructure still impresses, but the social temperature drops fast. The COVID era permanently altered the relationship between China and African communities. During lockdowns, widely reported incidents showed Africans being evicted from apartments, denied hotel access, and publicly blamed for virus spread. Those moments weren't just embarrassing headlines, they reshaped trust. Human rights organizations and international media documented how Africans were singled out in multiple cities, and that memory hasn't faded for people who lived through it. Even after restrictions eased, Black residents reported heightened scrutiny, random ID checks, and sudden policy changes that always seem to apply unevenly. Economic access has also narrowed. A decade ago, China was aggressively recruiting foreign talent: teachers, engineers, entrepreneurs. Today, the doors are closing quietly. Foreign hiring has slowed, language requirements have tightened, and many roles once open to expats now prioritize locals. Black professionals described contracts not being renewed, work permits denied without clear explanations, or being nudged out in favor of domestic hires. Teaching English remains an option, but even that space has shrunk as regulations crack down on private education. Visa instability keeps everyone on edge. China's visa rules can change overnight, and enforcement varies wildly by region. One city allows a practice, another suddenly bans. One officer approves a document, another rejects. For Black expats, that unpredictability feels amplified. Many describe living with packed suitcases, not metaphorically, but literally, because legal status can shift with little notice. Long-term planning becomes a gamble rather than a strategy. Social integration remains shallow outside global hubs. In smaller cities, being Black often means being stared at, photographed, or treated like an attraction. Curiosity replaces comfort. While some locals are genuinely friendly, others keep their distance, unsure how to interact. Dating and friendships are frequently complicated by stereotypes, language barriers, and assumptions shaped by limited exposure. China still offers opportunity: manufacturing, trade, tech-adjacent industries, but opportunity without trust is fragile. When systems feel inconsistent and acceptance feels conditional, the cost isn't just financial, it's psychological. For Black expats, China outside Tier 1 cities often feels like walking on shifting ground. Impressive on the surface, but never stable enough to fully relax. And when trust erodes, even strong opportunity starts to feel temporary. We're halfway through the countdown. If you are enjoying the video so far, hit the like button, subscribe to Virtual Travel by Brian, and ring the notification bell for more informative content. Let's get back into it. Number 5. Russia. Russia doesn't hide the tension. You feel it immediately. The cities look grand, the history feels heavy, and the atmosphere carries a constant edge. For Black travelers and expats, that edge isn't abstract. It shows up in stares that linger too long, comments that aren't whispered, and encounters that make it clear you've entered a space where difference isn't managed quietly. It's confronted openly. Reports of racial hostility in Russia are well documented, especially among Black students and long-term expats. International student groups and human rights monitors have repeatedly cited verbal abuse, physical intimidation, and racially motivated assaults, particularly outside central urban areas. Black students studying medicine and engineering often describe being targeted on public transport or treated as suspicious by default. This isn't microaggression culture. It's blunt. The message isn't subtle curiosity. It's discomfort mixed with resentment. Economic reality makes the situation worse. Sanctions and prolonged instability have shrunk opportunities across the board, but foreigners feel it first and hardest. Industries that once hired international talent, energy, engineering, education, have downsized or shut their doors to non-citizens entirely. Inflation and currency volatility eat away at wages, and companies are far less willing to sponsor work permits. For Black expats, upward mobility was already limited. Now, basic stability feels uncertain. Visa access has tightened significantly. Processing times are longer, requirements change with little notice, and approvals are far less predictable than they were a decade ago. Long-term residency options are narrowing, and permanent settlement is increasingly unrealistic. Many expats describe a sense of being allowed for now, without any real pathway forward. That kind of legal limbo keeps people cautious and stressed. Social integration remains thin. Friendships with locals are possible, but trust develops slowly, and political tension has made foreigners more suspect. Dating and social life come with their own challenges, often shaped by stereotypes or outright hostility. In smaller cities, being Black can feel like walking with a spotlight you didn't ask for and can't turn off. Russia once attracted Black students and professionals looking for affordable education and international exposure. Today, that calculation looks very different. Open racism, shrinking economic prospects, and tightening borders combine into a risk profile that's hard to justify. There's little incentive to endure hostility in a country offering fewer opportunities and less stability by the year. Russia isn't just unwelcoming, it's unpredictable. And for Black expats weighing where to invest their time, energy, and safety, unpredictability paired with open hostility is usually a deal breaker. When opportunity disappears and risk multiplies, walking away stops being fear-based. It becomes practical. Number 4. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia runs on structure, and everyone knows exactly where they stand inside it. From the moment you arrive, the hierarchy is clear, even if no one explains it out loud. Nationality, passport strength, skin tone, and job title quietly determine your lane. For Black expats, especially those from Africa or the Caribbean, that lane is narrow, clearly marked, and rarely negotiable. Colorism and classism aren't fringe issues here. They're baked into the social and labor system. Western expats often occupy the top tier: higher pay, better housing, more flexibility, while Black workers are disproportionately concentrated in lower status roles, regardless of education or experience. This isn't speculation. Labor reports and expat surveys consistently show wage gaps tied not just to nationality, but to perceived race. Two people doing the same job can live completely different lives based on where they're from and how they look. Citizenship is the immovable wall. Saudi Arabia does not function as an immigration country. Naturalization is technically possible, but so rare it's almost theoretical. Decades of residence, fluency in Arabic, professional success, none of it guarantees anything. You are not building toward belonging, you are renting your place in the system. And that understanding shapes every long-term decision, from housing to education to retirement planning. Economically, Saudi Arabia can be lucrative. Tax-free salaries, generous contracts, and employer-provided housing attract professionals from across the globe. For many Black expats, the money works, sometimes very well. But the economic relationship is transactional by design. You are there to perform a role. When the role ends, so does your welcome. Layoffs, contract changes, or policy shifts can send people packing with little notice. Social integration remains limited. Segregation, by nationality, by income, by race, is normalized. Friendships with locals are possible but rare and often bounded by strict social norms. Dating across cultural lines is heavily constrained. Outside of expat bubbles, many Black residents describe feeling invisible when it matters and hypervisible when it doesn't, questioned by security, scrutinized in upscale spaces, or assumed to belong to the service class. Safety is often cited as a major plus, and to be fair, violent crime is low. Infrastructure is modern, and daily life can feel orderly. But safety isn't the same as dignity. Being protected by the system doesn't mean being valued by it. Saudi Arabia offers income, not inclusion. Stability, not roots. For Black expats, the calculation is straightforward. You can earn, save, and leave better off financially, but you will never belong. And once that reality settles in, many start counting down, not the years they'll stay, but the moment they'll move on. Number 3. Kuwait. Kuwait makes its expectations clear early. You're here to work, not to settle. The skyline may be modern and the paychecks can look attractive, but beneath the polished surface sits a system designed to benefit employers first and everyone else a distant second. For Black expats, that reality isn't theoretical. It shows up in contracts, daily interactions, and the quiet understanding that your stay is always conditional. The backbone of Kuwait's expat structure is the kafala system, which ties a worker's legal status directly to their employer. Lose the job, and you risk losing the right to remain in the country. Change employers? That's complicated, slow, and often blocked entirely. Human rights organizations have long criticized this framework for enabling abuse and restricting worker mobility. For Black expats, the imbalance of power is felt sharply. Reporting mistreatment can jeopardize residency, so many simply endure it. Racial treatment in Kuwait is a recurring topic in expat forums and labor reports. Discrimination is widely reported, particularly against Black Africans and darker-skinned workers. Assumptions about intelligence, professionalism, and social status follow people into workplaces, housing searches, and even retail spaces. Many Black professionals describe being mistaken for domestic staff regardless of their role, while Black laborers report harsher treatment and fewer protections. This isn't hidden behavior. It's normalized enough to be casually explained away. Economic opportunity exists, but it's narrow. Kuwait can offer strong salaries, especially in oil-related industries, healthcare, and certain technical fields. The catch is upward mobility. Advancement is limited, job security depends heavily on employer goodwill, and benefits often vary sharply by nationality. Western expats typically occupy the top tier, while black workers, regardless of credentials, find themselves clustered lower in the hierarchy. Long-term planning is where the illusion breaks completely. Kuwait does not offer a future in the traditional sense. Permanent residency pathways are virtually non-existent, and citizenship is off the table for almost everyone who isn't Kuwaiti by birth. You can live there for decades and still be considered temporary. Retirement? Not happening. Family security? Fragile. One policy change, one contract dispute, and your entire life setup can unravel quickly. Social integration mirrors the legal structure. Communities remain segmented by nationality and class, and deep connections with locals are rare. Many black expats describe living in bubbles, work, home, expat circles, without ever feeling anchored to the country itself. Kuwait can make financial sense for a season. People come, earn, save, and leave. But the limitations don't fade with time. They harden. Temporary money can be real, even generous. The lack of a future, though, is permanent. And once that reality settles in, most black expats start planning their exit long before their contract ends. Number 2. Ukraine. Ukraine's reputation shifted dramatically once the world's attention locked onto war. Sympathy surged, headlines softened. But for black students and expats who lived there before the conflict, the story was already complicated, and it didn't begin with tanks. It began with everyday treatment that made one thing clear: black presence was permitted, not welcomed. Long before the invasion, Ukraine hosted thousands of African students, particularly in medical and technical universities. On paper, it looked like opportunity: lower tuition, accessible admissions, a European degree. In practice, many of those students documented a pattern of abuse that went far beyond culture shock. Human rights groups and African embassies repeatedly raised concerns about racial harassment, segregated housing, and unequal treatment by university administrators. Some black students reported being pushed into substandard dorms, charged unofficial fees, or threatened with academic consequences if they complained. Outside the classroom, the experience didn't improve. Verbal harassment on public transport, racial slurs in nightlife districts, and physical intimidation were frequently reported, especially in smaller cities. Police responses were often dismissive, and in some cases, officers themselves were accused of targeting black residents for document checks or bribes. The message wasn't hidden. Visibility came with vulnerability. Economic opportunity was thin even before the war. Ukraine's economy struggled with corruption, low wages, and limited upward mobility. For black expats, job options outside education or informal sectors were scarce. Language barriers mattered, but race often mattered more. Professional advancement was rare, and many found themselves stuck, overqualified, underpaid, and isolated. Cultural inclusion was almost non-existent. Ukraine had and still has a very small black population, which meant no meaningful support networks, limited community spaces, and constant hyper-visibility. Being black wasn't something you could fade into. You were noticed everywhere, all the time. Curiosity sometimes passed for friendliness, but it rarely evolved into genuine inclusion. Dating, friendships, and professional networking all came with added friction, shaped by stereotypes and social distance. Then came the war, and with it, a moment that crystallized pre-war realities. During evacuations, African students documented being pushed back at borders, denied access to transport, or told to wait while others passed. International media eventually covered these incidents, but for those who lived there, it wasn't shocking. It was confirmation. Ukraine deserves empathy for what it has endured. Two truths can coexist. A nation can suffer invasion and still have unresolved issues with racism. For black expats and students, Ukraine was never a long-term home. It was a temporary stop tolerated for tuition or labor, not embraced as part of the social fabric. When stability disappears, tolerance isn't enough. And for many black people who lived there, that reality was already clear long before the world started watching. Number 1. North Korea. North Korea isn't a place you move to. It's a place you are allowed to enter under supervision, temporarily, conditionally, and only if the state decides you're useful or invisible enough not to matter. For Black travelers, expats, or anyone even entertaining the idea of relocation, this isn't a gray area. It's a hard stop. Visa access is virtually non-existent. North Korea does not operate a conventional immigration system. There are no work visas, no residency permits, no expat pathways, and certainly no citizenship process. Entry is tightly controlled through government-approved tours, diplomatic channels, or rare state-to-state arrangements. Independent travel doesn't exist. You don't choose where you go, who you speak to, or what you see. Every movement is monitored. Every interaction is curated. That alone removes North Korea from any serious conversation about travel freedom, let alone relocation. Cultural inclusion sits at zero, and that's not hyperbole. North Korea is one of the most ethnically homogeneous countries on Earth, with near total isolation from global migration for decades. Foreigners aren't integrated because integration isn't the goal. They are displayed, managed, and kept separate. For Black visitors, that separation is even more pronounced. Curiosity can turn into spectacle, and ignorance fills the gaps where exposure never existed. There is no community, no cultural exchange, and no space to exist as yourself. Economic opportunity doesn't just fall short, it doesn't exist. There is no private labor market for foreigners, no entrepreneurship, no independent employment. The economy functions entirely under state control. Any work done by foreigners is strictly regulated, limited to diplomatic, humanitarian, or state-approved projects. You are not earning, building, or advancing. You are observing, under watch. Safety is the most unpredictable variable. While violent street crime may be rare, the real risk comes from the system itself. Laws are opaque, enforcement is absolute, and punishment can be severe. There is no due process in the way most of the world understands it. A misunderstood gesture, an unapproved photo, or an accidental rule violation can escalate quickly. For Black visitors, racial unfamiliarity adds another layer of uncertainty. How actions are interpreted, how mistakes are judged, and how little recourse exists if something goes wrong. North Korea represents the extreme end of this countdown for a reason. It strips the conversation down to its core. Travel without freedom isn't travel. Presence without rights isn't living. And relocation without agency isn't relocation, it's isolation. This list wasn't about fear. It was about patterns, systems, and lived experience. If this video challenged your assumptions, sparked recognition, or raised questions, that's the point. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your experiences, and if you want more unfiltered investigative breakdowns about global travel, relocation, and the realities no one markets, stay locked in and keep watching Virtual Travel by Brian.